Perfect. Okay, so good morning, everybody, and thank you ever so much for taking the time to join us this morning. Suppose really the aim around the next hour or so is to give you as much information as we possibly can around resource, health and safety, and the HR impacts of the last few weeks and also the next few weeks coming, because this is an ever-changing feast that we've got going on at the moment. So it's very, very easy to become confused with what's out there at the moment. So hopefully between the three of us, we will give you half an idea of how to carry on going forward. So just to give you a bit of an idea of what to expect, I want to talk to you all about who you're bringing back, how you're bringing them back, what capacity, and things to think about in terms of when you're making the decisions on who to bring back to your business. I'll then hand over to Emily from Health and Safety Support Services, who will give you some ideas of what you need to consider with regards to health and safety in the workplace when you do start bringing staff back. And then we'll pass over to Lynn, who will give you all the hints and tips and the latest updates, which is changing by the hour at the moment, on employment law and HR stuff that you need to be considering. So, those of you that have got staff, now is the time. You may have already started bringing people back, or you might just be sitting on the, right, okay, what's happening? Who am I bringing back? So now's the time to kind of look at who you are bringing back into the business. And there's a lot of things that that businesses need to be considering at the moment in terms of how many people they need to bring back and what their business looks like. Chances are your business may look completely different to what it did in sort of January, February of this year. A lot of businesses have had to pivot during the last few months, and you may find that in doing so, you found a better way of working. So you may not need to bring people back. But what you need to do is kind of start taking stock of your resource in terms of people, look at what they can do and how they can do it. So, first thing you need to be considering is what your business looks like now, and therefore who do you need to bring back, and what are the cost implications of bringing them back. So if you're working in a business like Spencers, for example, where there is normally 49 people in the office, do you need all 49 of those people to come back? In which case, what is that going to cost the business? And actually, let's be brutally honest, business is still not back to normal. It's not business as normal. People are not earning the same amounts of cash that they used to. Can the business afford to be bringing all those people back in from day one, or do they need to stagger it? So the first thing that you need to do really is start looking long and hard at what your business looks like now and what you can afford to bring back in. And Lynn will tell you a little bit more later on in terms of the furlough schemes and how they can be accessed. So there is support out there still, but that is starting to be phased out. So it's worth bearing that in mind. Now, one of the things that we've done with our clients when they've started looking at resource and what they're bringing back is do almost like a customer journey. So it's looking at what the touch points are in your business. So what processes need to be in place for your business to run effectively. Now, we did this ourselves within Slice, but I would suggest that every business needs to be doing it at this point, looking at your model from A to Z. So from the second a client or a customer contacts you, right the way through to the end of that transaction, whether it's purchasing a product or a service, map out every single touch point that that person has with the business and go into as much detail as you physically can. I found it really simple talking through my processes with someone that had no idea what I did, because I think sometimes as business owners, you take for granted, you go, oh, well, this happens and that happens because you know. Actually, if you can talk it through with somebody that may not understand your business as well as you do, they're going to ask the questions that you wouldn't ask of yourself. And they will highlight certain things that you think, oh, I've not thought of that. So you need to have a really robust plan of what your customer journey is, and that will highlight the processes that need to be in place for your business to run effectively. And then from there, you need to look at what work needs to be done to keep those processes moving. So what needs to happen to get your customer from point A to B to C to D, so that you can see, again, what that customer journey is going to look like. That will give you some idea of who in your business, you then need to have an idea of who in your business is responsible for what. So I've got a client at the moment that, because of everything that's going on, they are bringing back more the fulfillment side of their business, not so much the new business development side. So that's highlighted the fact that they need the people that are booking in the jobs, physically carrying out the jobs, back in the business sooner rather than later, because they have a backlog of work they've not been able to do during lockdown. The business development side in the right here and now is not as vital. So we advise them to focus more on their operation side rather than their business development side. And they're the people that they need to bring back, because that's where they're going to keep their cash. Yes, ultimately, we'll look at doing the business development as well, but in the here and now, just look at that one. But it's also worth considering at this moment, in some respects, it's kind of, a lot of people have often said to us, you know, I'd love to be able to wipe the slate clean and start again, or just stop, just press the stop button and take stock of what I've got, who I've got, and how that's working. And you've kind of been given that opportunity. So now's the chance for you guys to have a look and see, right, do any of these processes that we've just highlighted, can they be automated? I've done that within my business, because I've realized now more than ever, used to run around a bit like a busy fool, and it wasn't necessary. So with a little bit of thought and planning, we've now built an infrastructure that actually some things right here and now while I'm talking to you are going on behind the scenes that I'm not actually doing. It's just set to automate, so that it takes out the need. And I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that you have to start making massive redundancies, quite the opposite. But in the short term, it's making sure that we're getting the most out of your people, rather than having them doing things that could potentially be automated, so that that person can concentrate on something that is more vital to your business. After you've done all of that, you should then have a plan of who needs to come back to make your business work effectively. So very much like I said, for one of our clients that's been through this process, we knew that right here, right now, they need to start bringing their operational staff back. We've got a plan for a couple of months' time to bring everybody else back, but the people that need to be back in now and sharpish are the ones that are going to be able to fulfill the jobs that have been booked in since February and not be able to be carried out for one reason or another. So with you guys, I suppose it's time for you guys to be honest and to start looking at your own businesses. So what can you automate? Is there anything in your business that could be automatically going on behind the scenes while you're not having to do it, or your staff are having to do it? Who needs to come back to aid you and your business to run effectively? And that doesn't necessarily have to be, oh, well, I like that person, or that person needs to come back. It's time to start sort of looking and being a little bit brutal, really, in terms of how your business needs to operate. We also need to be looking at how your business may have changed over the last few months. I know mine has drastically. I think most of us have been used to working online. Some businesses will think that's great and they'll want to continue on with that. Other businesses will want to get things back to some kind of physical normality as soon as possible. So how has your business changed, and do you need to adjust? Do you need the same workforce that you had beforehand? Do you need to ramp it up? Do you need to scale it back? These are all questions that you need to be asking yourself. And if you are having to restructure, and restructure doesn't have to mean redundancies, it can mean moving people around. And as long as it's done effectively, which I'm sure Lynn will talk to you about in a short space of time, as long as it's done effectively, it can be a very positive change. But you've been given the opportunity now for that pause button to be pressed, so that you can look and go, right, have we got people in the right positions to be making the most amount of impact that they possibly can in your business? So if you are looking at restructuring, like I say, it doesn't have to be a downsize. It can be looking at, right, I've gone through the process, I've mapped out my customer journey, and I can clearly see where my gaps are, and I know what those gaps need to be filled. Are you going to start offering flexible working? Those of you that have known me for some time know that I'm a big advocate of flexible working when executed correctly. And I find it slightly ironic now that a lot of businesses that I spoke to a while ago was telling me, oh, it can't work, it wouldn't work for our business. Now they're being forced to make it work. They've stood back and gone, actually, this really works for us. So actually, if you found that it has, and it's something that you want to embrace, is that something that you can start embedding in your company culture? And if that is the case, sorry, I think Caroline's just trying to get back in. If that is the case, then great. But then let's get somebody like Lynn to get that the infrastructure around that effectively, because it's not as easy as just saying to your member of staff, yeah, go and work from home. You know, there are things around it that you need to do to protect them and to protect yourself. But if it's something that you want to embrace, then that's great. Who wants to return? So again, we've had cases where people have been used to being working from home now for some time and have seen that they can actually do their role quite effectively and have quite liked it. So don't be alarmed if suddenly you've got members of staff asking to be able to work remotely. have those conversations, see whether or not it's going to work for you and for the business. I wouldn't immediately discount it. From a recruitment point of view, those businesses that are going to embrace flexible working and working from home, do it correctly and effectively, they will be the ones that will come out of this smelling of roses, and it will be an awful lot easier going forward to recruit for businesses like that. I think gone are the days now where people want to be on the road 5 days a week and working 60-hour weeks, because people have seen now that it doesn't have to happen for business to continue on. And what resource do you already have in the business? You know, you may have had an administrator that sits in the corner that was doing reasonably basic admin that all of a sudden has come into their own and have started doing other bits and pieces because they've had to pull together and actually have excelled. So is now the time to look at, right, who's already in my business with maybe a bit of support, training, upskilling? Could we move them into a different capacity? So it's about taking stock at what you have in your business currently and what you still need going forward. So Slice we offer a workforce analysis program. So just to give you a bit of idea, it's essentially everything that I have just said. So we will help businesses track their customer journey. We will do a resource assessment, so what you already have and what you potentially may need. We'll look at tasks that you need to set up to automate, so therefore you may not need to recruit. We can offer a list of suggested suppliers to help you to do that if that's required. We can offer a recruitment plan to help you sort of execute all of this if it's required. And like I say, it doesn't necessarily have to be now. It may be, right, okay, you've got this in place for now. Let's bring that back. Let's get that embedded. And then in 2 months, there's your gap. That's what we'll look at filling. But you've got the plan so you know what's happening. And the accountability to execute it. So we've had quite a good response to this, because I think sometimes, as I say, it's very simple when you are working in your business to kind of just assume everybody knows what you're talking about. And by having somebody external in to talk it through with you, and then to be able to say, right, you need to engage with somebody like Emily or somebody like Lynn to help you move on to the next steps, it's a good sounding board. Now, we normally charge a half day rate for that, but there will, and I'll email out after this, but there is a discount for the delegates that are on today for anybody that wants to do that. But I will send more details out about that afterwards. So it's just some ideas and some of the things that you need to be thinking about before you sort of go gung-ho and say, right, from the 1st of August, let's bring everybody back in. Doesn't necessarily need to look that way. So I'm now going to shut up, and I'm going to pass over to Emily to have a chat with you about all things health and safety.
Slide in. There we go. Right, hello everybody. So yeah, once you have done Lisa's piece of work and you've decided who you want to bring back, before they set foot in the door, we need to make sure that your business premises is safe. So just a little bit about us. We're quite local. We offer bespoke services to everybody, and part of what we do is, the big thing there is risk assessments. So that's something I'm going to talk about today, and you're going to hear the word COVID secure mentioned quite a bit. So it's been mentioned, it's on all the posters, is your business COVID secure? There's a piece of imagery that you can get from the HSE website that you can put on your social media. You can put it on your own website to show everybody that yes, you are COVID secure. But what does that mean? In general, anyone that is COVID secure must have done a risk assessment to document it, but you need to be regularly reviewing all the guidelines. They are coming out on a daily basis at the minute. Different businesses, different industries that are now able to either start working or can look at bringing people back in. So it is a regular review of all your control measures. You also need to be communicating these control measures out. So it's not just a case of you as your business owner putting all your things in place. You need to let your staff know. Everyone that's coming back into the workplace needs to know what is expected of them, what they've got to do to make sure they keep your business COVID secure. You will then have a specific risk assessment in place to document and measure what you're putting down as your either your social distancing requirements or your PPE requirements, and all the things you're expecting your staff potentially to do differently. You also need to listen to your workforce, so it's not a one-way street doing this COVID secure project. It's needing to listen to your staff, listen to your workforce, consult with them, which is a word we use a lot in health and safety and in HR, on what actually their concerns are and what are their feedback. They are the ones that are going to be working within these control measures. Do they envisage any problems either from their own well-being point of view? Do they feel safe to be back? Or does actually something you're implementing stop them doing a job in a certain way? Does it actually implicate the work processes that you normally have in place? So really listen to your staff and see and hear their concerns, because they will be able to help you maintain your COVID secure status. But your main objection of bringing anybody back and getting your workplace ready is that any person, be it an employee, any visitors to your workplace, or any members of the public that might come by your workplace, they are not put at any increased risk of obviously getting the COVID virus by being anywhere in or around your workplace or involved in your workplace activities. So that really is the definition of being COVID secure. We've always had a responsibility as employers to make sure everybody's safe, but this is sort of an extra call to action that we've got, and a new, as with all this COVID stuff, we've got new terminology, we've got used to the word furlough, we've got used to the word COVID-19, COVID secure is just the latest thing to kind of get used to, and the terminology you're going to hear a lot of. So these are generic. Each control measure will be bespoke to your workplace. So I can't give you a list of everything that you've got to do. It really does need to be tailored to your workplace, your work processes, and exactly what you're trying to achieve. And they will change sometimes on a daily basis. But these are kind of the general things that you ought to be considering before you start bringing people back. Social distancing, so that has fluctuated from 2 meters to 1 meter with extra controls. So it's thinking about what your workplace allows, what you can actually accommodate, and what your staff feel safe with. So in some areas you might be able to stick to the 2 meters, in others you might have to bring it down to 1, but then put some extra controls in, like screens or PPE, to then actually be able to continue to have people in that area. Think about your workspace, so you might have to be moving desks around. If there's equipment that's normally shared, maybe you might need to get some extra equipment in so that people can have their own phone. If you're thinking about maybe putting screens up between desks, if you can't avoid people working face to face, then maybe putting screens up between the desks to give an extra control measure there. So it's really thinking about the workspace that you've got and what can you do to make it safe. Think about maximum capacity in rooms. I went to visit a potential client the other day, and they had some great posters up on each office space detailing the number of people that could be in that room based on the size of it. So that was a really good thing to do. It was easy to look at, that you could get to the door of that room and think, right, this is how many people can be in here, and then you know not to enter if there's more than that people in there, and if you're planning meetings and things like that. So it was a really good visual way, particularly if you've got multiple offices in a location, or your workspaces, multiple office, then you can easily show how many people need to be in each work area. And again, it's looking at the size of the room, and then looking at your 1 or 2 meter rule for your social distancing, thinking about ventilation and what kind of PPE you might need, or extra additional things you can put in place. Other thing to think about, and it's a big thing that we talk about in health and safety support services, we always try to remember the health part of health and safety. So we're thinking about your mental health consideration of your employees. It's been a tough time. Everyone's been on a bit of a roller coaster. They've been working from home. They maybe have been homeschooling. They may have had family members affected. They may have had to shield. It's been tough. So just think about, this is a big change. It was a big change going to working from home. It's going to be a big change coming back. And some people are going to be anxious. Some people are going to be chomping at the bit to get back, and they can't wait to get back in the office, myself being one of them. There are other people that are really, really wary of it, and they need to know what's in place. So when you're thinking about who you're going to bring back, that's another area to think about. Some people are going to be wary of it, and so we need to hear their concerns and listen to their concerns. We can go through all the social distancing that we've got in place, but just generally think, if they are really worried about it, do they have to come back? What can we do to make people just feel comfortable and safe being back at work? So it's not making it all clinical and just saying, this is what you've got to do. Just really think about people that have gone through a tough time, and can you support them? Cleaning schedules, so think about your touch points. So a different type of touch point that Lisa just mentioned. These are touch points, physical touch points. Where do people touch? We're thinking handrails, we're thinking door handles, printers, scanners, copiers, the things that multiple people are going to be touching, the kettle, coffee cups, thinking about those and when they're cleaned and how often, and that will purely be determined by the number of people and the footfall that you've got going through your building. But think about cleaning those, whether you have to increase them yourselves and you have to get your staff getting the Zaflora out and the cloths and doing it, or whether if you've got an external cleaning company that clean your offices or your workplace for you, talk to them about what they can do in terms of increasing the cleaning schedules and making sure that the place is sanitised as it needs to be. But individually, hand sanitisers on desks or hand sanitizer in reception areas and stuff like that. It's all just about keeping the cleanliness and hand washing facilities and things like that. And the other one, it kind of falls into all of them, but PPE might be required. At the minute, masks or face coverings are not required in the workplace. We've got the new one with shops, that we're wearing them shops, but right now, and I'm saying it with caution because who knows, he may change his mind, but right now masks are not required in the workplace. I do have a client that is offering them, and they are available if they want them, but it's just something to think about. Again, what do your staff want? How do they feel safe? But there may be some areas where PPE is required, and that you need to accommodate that. So there's some very general actions that you might need to take, but you will need to make them bespoke and specific to your business. Just in terms of how you get this message out, like I said at the beginning, it's really important that this isn't a one-way street. It's not just you as the business owner or as the manager deciding what you're going to do. It's communicated. You make sure that everybody knows about it. So COVID-19 specific risk assessments are a requirement of the government, and they did say that if you've got 50 or more employees, you should publish them on your website in somewhere that's easily accessible to be seen. But to be honest, I think that's just a really good thing to do anyway. So, I mean, I've put it on mine, I've put it on our, some of our clients' ones that have only got sort of 10, 15 employees. It just shows that you've done it. Use social media, you know, put the HSE We Are COVID Secure statement out, just to show that you're doing it. It might help your customers or your suppliers be a bit more inclined to start working with you again, because they say, actually, yeah, you're up and running. So we'll get in touch and we'll start working with you because it's safe and all right to do so. But signage in the workplace is also a really good way to communicate it out so everybody knows. So either visitors coming in know what they've got to do, if they've got to do something different with deliveries. But your staff know, again, how many people they can have in a room and what the order is. If they've got to go a one way around an office or something like that, then there's signage that sort of says. But have briefings to your teams, you know, briefings at our team meetings where they can communicate back, have feedback sessions, whether that is that they're all together because you can safely do so, or let's just keep using Zoom and getting our teams together so we can communicate that. But it needs to be frequently reviewed. Somebody needs to be responsible for keeping on top of the government updates. There are ways and means of doing it. You can sign up on the government website to get updates to coronavirus. Please don't make the mistake I did and ask for daily updates, otherwise your inbox will be full every day. I've now changed it. Yeah, if you ask for one every day or every time something's updated, you will never see any other email other than Gov in your inbox. So change it to sort of getting a weekly update is better. But keep an eye on stuff that's going on, or get in touch with the person that helps you with your HR or the person that helps you with your health and safety, because we can let you know what you need to be doing next. But there has been, and like I said, it changes daily. So I prepared this presentation, and sod's law, since I've done it, there has been something new come out. So let me just grab the article. Yorkshire is a hotspot for COVID-19, unfortunately, due to the number of cases. So the HSE have published that they will be targeting COVID hotspots, of which Yorkshire is one, for checking compliance. So this will be a mixture of phone calls where will they ask to be on video so they can actually see your workplace, or potentially site visits. So the phone calls include obtaining visual evidence. Some of the things that they will be looking for is failure to provide arrangements for monitoring, supervising and maintaining social distancing. Failure to introduce an adequate cleaning regime, particularly at busy times of day, and providing access to welfare facilities to allow employees to frequently wash their hands with warm water and soap. So Yorkshire is being targeted. I say it's unfortunate because in any sort of hotspot areas where there's been a lot of cases, the HSE are looking at. I did have one client, and it wasn't because it was a hotspot. We actually had a disgruntled employee try to report their employer to HSE. And they did ask for a significant amount of detail. It's not going to be a quick phone call to say what you're doing and you say, oh yeah, I've got some signs up and there's soap in the kitchen, they can wash their hands. We had to do a full-on report in 48 hours. They needed pictures, they needed commentary with the pictures. So they're not going to be quick calls if they are doing spot checks. What they can do, the HSE, if they do find that they're not happy with what you're doing, is they may just provide specific advice. If they think that maybe you just need some further support, their first port of call is always to give you the advice and the support that you need to get you where you need to be. However, they do have the power to give enforcement notices. They could stop certain work practices until they're safe to do so, or worst case scenario, you can be prosecuted. So not that I'm wanting to scare everybody today, but worst case scenario. But we're in Yorkshire, I believe, most of us. So we really need to be a bit more aware than maybe other areas of the country that the HSE are maybe coming for us, and we may just get a random spot check. Doesn't say what protocol they're going to use for how they're doing the random, who they see, but it could be anybody. So whilst we are talking about all of these, this actually just sort of proves a point as to why we're doing this. And yeah, all best made plans, it came out this week, so just proves a point. So for the future, what you need to do, COVID-19 is the tip of the iceberg when it comes to health and safety. There are learning points from this. There's probably extra wording that we need to put in, or extra documentation we need to put in for infection control procedures. We never saw COVID come in. We don't know what's around the corner. We don't know in the future what might happen. God forbid something happens again and we get another pandemic of hopefully on a smaller scale, but if anything comes along, if we can learn anything from this, is putting in place infection control procedures and what we're going to do, and probably carry on some of the protocols we've got now, even when it sort of dies down, that we can keep carrying on, keeping everybody safe, and the cleanliness. So keeping your cleaning schedules going, keeping your hand washing protocols going, and face-to-face contact, you know, like Lisa said, not just from a workforce planning point of view, that actually it works to be online. It might just be a safer option and reduce down your necessary need to be face-to-face in some scenarios. So for people on this call, we are offering a free review to anyone that wants me to look at their COVID-19 risk assessment if you've already done it, or any associated documentation with COVID, just to make sure that you aren't going to fall foul of the HSE if they come knocking on your doorstep, which I really hope nobody gets to that. But if they do, please get in touch if you need any support with that. So we will move on to Lynn.
Thank you very much. Right, on to me. So as the ladies have quite rightly said, you know, the world of work has changed quite significantly over the last few months, and certainly employees thinking, you know, we've all been on a bit of a personal journey, haven't we? Lockdown hasn't been easy for a lot of us, and it has changed the way we think about things. So I just wanted to start off with some stats. So apparently 61% of employees would like to continue working from home more often following lockdown, which goes hand in hand, you know, with what Lisa was saying, and actually might help with employers' decisions, you know, if that is the case. So Emily mentioned mental health. So 38% of workers believe that lockdown has had a negative impact on their mental health, partly due down to isolation and separation from humans. You know, I've been working from home and struggled with it significantly, to the point where I've now begged to come back in the office, you know, and I feel 100% better for it. So, and we'll come back to that in a minute, but 55% of workers believe productivity is as good as it was before lockdown. And I think certainly with our business, we've found that that's the case. Where we thought, oh, you know, we haven't allowed as many people to work from home previously, actually the roles that we thought people might struggle with, they have actually succeeded, and you know, productivity has carried on just as much as it has before lockdown. So I think that's increased the trust, it's increased that relationship between the employees, and so yeah, actually it's not been as significant as people might, in some areas, that people might have thought. And actually 75% of workers have said that they've used at least 2 new types of technology for work. We were talking earlier before the session about Zoom fatigue. I mean, without the technology, I think it's clear to say that we would have been much more isolated, and things would have been a lot more difficult. And yeah, as Lisa was saying earlier, you know, the automation side of things, we've actually brought in electronic pay slips since we've gone into lockdown, because it just absolutely made sense. You know, why are we spending all this money on sending out paper wage slips when actually people, you know, people are tapping into technology more, and it just made absolute sense. So there's definitely scope to introduce technology into what you're doing in the future, and I think, you know, a lot of places won't be going back to the previous normal. So Oh, could you move the slide along? Thanks. So being a HR professional, I advise to consult with CIPD. So we've talked a little bit about what roles you might need. So drilling down into that, once you've got that in place and you know which roles you actually need for your business, then you need to look at the individuals as well. You still, at this moment in time, don't have to bring people back. You know, they're still advising that actually, where possible, work from home still. So is it essential to bring people back? Second of all, is it safe? Which, you know, Emily's just gone through that. Make sure that you've done everything that Emily told you to do before you get back to that point. And also, and Emily mentioned this as well, is it mutually agreeable? You know, so have those discussions with staff. Are they one of that % that don't want to come back? You know, don't force people back if they don't want to. Can you come to a bit of a compromise and just discuss it? And then once you've got, once you're starting to have those conversations, you know, you need to obviously understand that this has been a massive health risk, and there's still people that are classed as high risk, vulnerable, possibly pregnant. So you might need to look at, okay, we definitely want that role back, but that person who does that role, are they able to come back? So again, have those discussions. Do they still have caring responsibilities who might be in that high risk category? I have considered doing almost like a questionnaire before people actually come back, because you know, I don't know everything about those individuals. I don't know what they've been through the lockdown. You know, have they come into contact with other people that might have had COVID? You know, it is about reducing that risk. And if that person doesn't need to come back, then brilliant. Also, any clinically sick individuals need to remain at home on furlough whilst it's available, or on sick leave. So obviously it's still the case that if people have COVID symptoms, then they should absolutely not be coming into the workplace. So that is still the case. They would need to, if you haven't furloughed them already, then you might need to consider sick leave for those individuals. But again, it's about protecting the workforce. It's about protecting the workplace as well. So reducing that risk as much as possible. And having those open conversations, you know, it's not about just casting people on the heap, you know. Just because people have a condition does not mean that they are not capable of doing other things. So start having those open conversations. Say, do you feel like doing your usual job? Do you feel up to doing your usual job with your health problem? If not, is there something else that you could move them into on a temporary basis? What parts of the job will you find difficult because of your health problem? Again, you know, get them to be honest. And I think there has to be a degree of honesty from both sides. It's about being open, transparent, being supportive as an employer, wanting to retain, you know, the talent that you have, rather than pushing people away, particularly because it has been a particularly challenging time, and working with them. So what can we do to change to help overcome the difficulties that we might face? You know, there might be challenges coming up. You might need to work with people a bit more. You know, I mean, where we've been flexible with staff, it pays dividends. You know, it really does. Whilst we've had staff working from home, obviously we've had a high proportion of our staff have had homeschooling. They might be living with key workers. So actually in the daytime when they would be doing their job, they're having to entertain 2-year-olds, etc., because their partner's out at work. We've flexed their hours. We've allowed them to work over weekends if necessary. It is obviously weighing up, you know, don't feel like you've got to surrender everything because you've got a business to run. You know, it is about having those conversations to work out what they can do, rather than going, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that. You know, look at it from a positive perspective and work with people. That's our advice. So flexible furlough. So furlough, I don't know about other people, but it has been a godsend. It certainly has helped. Where redundancies might have been a reality, you know, at the early stages, where everybody was thinking, oh my God, what is going to happen? And then this wonderful word that none of us had heard before appeared, and we got up to scratch pretty quickly on this. And so it has been really, really good. And obviously this is still around until October. Now, as Lisa mentioned earlier, the terms are changing slightly. So and those of you who have furloughed staff will no doubt be aware of that. But from the 1st of July, we moved from the old furlough scheme into flexible furlough. And this allowed basically, so it's a two-way thing. So it's allowing you to bring people back on a gradual basis, so you can flex their hours and get them doing part-time, etc. But it is also a way of the government to start tapering and reducing that level of support that they've been giving to employers. So at this moment in time, employers are still entitled to the 80% with the option to top up by 20%. And this continues through August. Actually, can I have the next slide, please? So at the moment, we're still in the 80% paid, which is capped at 2,500 income per month. And the government have been paying the NICs and pension contributions. But through August, they're starting to introduce, so like I say, tapering that support out so that employers start to pick up more of the bill on that. So from August, it's still 80% paid with the same cap, 2,500, but employers to start paying the NICs and pension contributions, and that's through the whole of August. And then September, that 80% drops to 70%, and the cap now drops to £2,187.50, and again, the employers continue to pay the NICs and pension. And right down to October, where it does drop again by 10%, and the cap also drops to 1,875. And there might be some questions around that, but if I just give you, if I go to the next slide, I'll give you a bit of an example, a bit of a case study. So I can use us as an example. Actually, we haven't had to furlough too many people, thankfully, but it has been really good to be able to tap into that scheme. So you might have an employee A who was currently employed full time, but once you've worked with Lisa and you've understood that actually maybe you need to start reintroducing some people to the office, then you need to allow them to see out whatever furlough period they've been in up to now, because the new scheme is slightly different. So you need to actually enter them into the flexible furlough scheme. So let them see out that 3 weeks. Make sure you have the conversation with them. Don't just tell them, oh yeah, by the way, you're coming back this date, these days. You know, have that discussion with them, because obviously it's still school holidays. People might still be have caring responsibilities, etc. Agree the working pattern and time frame with them, and be very clear on which days they'll be back. And actually, they might not be back in the office, so to speak. They might still be working from home. But on those 3 days that they're furloughed, and then they'll be paid whatever percentage I've said on the previous slide, depending on the month. And then the 2 days, they will be paid their full pay, whether they're in the workplace or in the office. So you as an employer would claim the 3 days per week furlough, and then you'd pay the 2 days in relevant of the relevant percentage going forwards. And the cap under the flexible furlough scheme is slightly different. So obviously it's going to be prorated if you are doing so a full-time employee doing 2 or 3 days a week, for example. That brings the cap down, which will be prorated. So hopefully that's self-explanatory. Can I have the next slide, please? You've probably heard again, like things are changing on a regular basis. But there's £1,000 job retention bonus to any employers. This has been met with some cynicism. It would be clear. It'd be clear to say it's trying to incentivise employers to keep people in employment beyond the furlough scheme. Now, I think at the moment we're not clear on what the figures are going to look like in redundancy, because the furlough scheme is masking that to a certain extent. But I like the commitment, that to encourage people to not just go for the redundancy option if they're still having issues, to try, and I'll come on to other options you can look at before considering redundancy. But for some employers, this might be a really good incentive. £1,000. So basically, they'll receive £1,000 for every furloughed employee who remains in post until the end of January, and they need to be on a salary of at least £520 a month. The furlough scheme, the furlough scheme itself has, the reason it's being tapered, it's cost the government a huge amount of money. So apparently not over 9 million people have benefited from the state-funded furlough scheme. In fact, when they announced the flexible furlough scheme, another couple of 100,000 people applied for it overnight. So it did increase massively. So it has been taken up, and it does leave that question: what's going to happen when that's not there? And I do worry about that for employers. But so what are your options then? What I would say is, throughout the whole of this process, keeping people engaged is really important. You've got a lot of talent in your workforce that have been loyal throughout this particularly difficult period. You want to be honest with them. Once you're clear on your plans, even if you haven't got your plan in place yet, and you're still waiting to see what happens, tell them that. Tell them that you're looking into everything that you can. Like Emily said, be clear. If people are worried about coming back to the workforce, listen to their concerns. With your COVID, what was your term? COVID secure. COVID secure. With your COVID secure scheme in place, then they shouldn't have those concerns, because you'll have hit them head on. Any risks, you'll have hit them head on, and you'll put those measures in place, because again, it's about minimizing the risk of transferring the infection. It's a bit concerning to hear that Yorkshire is on the the high I was considering going to Whitby on my holidays, but I might change that now. So involve them in changes, as we've all said. Ask their thoughts on improvements. Sometimes when you are in it, I think Lisa mentioned this actually, sometimes when you're in it, you can't see the wood from the trees. And actually, some really simple suggestions can be implemented from people from the outside looking in. So do ask people for suggestions as well on how they think it should look going forwards. Has their job changed? Are they finding that they're really not doing the same tasks, that they were in the office? Has their productivity increased? Could they take on other tasks, that might be falling through the cracks elsewhere? And having those regular team catch-ups is really important to keep people engaged and just involved in all the changes. Okay, and I think my final slide, as I said earlier, redundancy might be a reality, but what I would urge you to do is, before you get to that point, really look through some of the other options. So, have you got people that might be coming up to the end of their working life, that might consider early retirement? Would you be able to flex job roles? Would you be able to job share? You know, look, it's about thinking outside the box and looking at other alternatives, really. Could you put, you know, if outgoings is a big issue, could you ask employees to stop working for a short time or reduce their hours? You know, I do know of employers that have, you know, where people have taken a pay cut, they've asked managers to take a pay cut, and they've, you know, what's the alternative? People would much rather stick with their employer and know that they've got a job for the long term. And actually, I think a lot of people have realised that they can live on less during the lockdown period. So again, things have changed, priorities have changed. So whereas people might not have considered that in the past, this might be a reality that they've come to the conclusion to anyway. Could you retrain employees in, you know, into other areas of the business? If you've had a reduction of business in this one area of the business, sorry, how many times can I say business in one sentence? And there are people over here that are twiddling their thumbs, you know, can you, or sorry, if you've had a rise in one area of the business and people over here are twiddling their thumbs, you know, can you upskill them to actually take those tasks on? Because you know, at least have those discussions. Again, people would probably likely want to stay with their current employer rather than have to seek something else elsewhere at this sort of, in this current climate. Obviously, if you have got temporary or contractors, employers employed with you, then it's probably best to, you know, to bring those to a close, because they don't have as many entitlements as your fully fledged employees. So it's a bit of a no-brainer, unfortunately. But again, by letting those go as a priority, might mean that you can retain your employed staff that have worked with you for a long time. I think probably a lot of you have done this already. Maybe limiting or stopping overtime has probably been something at the forefront. And obviously putting a freeze on, Lisa might not agree with me.
You might be surprised to hear it, but I completely agree.
Putting a freeze for this moment in time, you know, because, I mean, actually, if it is going to be a redundancy situation, you've got to be clear that that is the case. You know, redundancy isn't about just going, oh, you know, that individual, they've been performing for a long time, it's time to get rid of them. You know, that is not a redundancy. It is looking at the jobs and the tasks that you need for the long term. You know, if that isn't there anymore, or it doesn't have a place anymore, then yeah, fair enough. But yeah, having that commitment that, you know, don't start hiring new employees if other people are going to be at risk. I mean, that's ridiculous. You know, again, I would say urge you to go back to the, you know, can you utilise those people in the new area of the business? Again, you know, you'll probably find that people are more likely to be looking at other opportunities within their current company rather than wanting to go elsewhere. And yeah, I mean, I work for Spencers Solicitors in Chesterfield. I omitted to say that at the beginning, but we are working with employers all the time around just, you know, banishing some of the myths around some of these things, getting a real practical approach to their business, really, and their people, the people side of their business, just making sure they've got things in place that to make sure they're protected for the long term. To make sure that they've considered the legal implications if they don't get things right as well. There's a few other considerations there that I would urge you to look at. You know, drill down into the policies you've got already, just to make sure that you are bringing them up to date with any changes that have happened. Certainly you want to be, you know, we've been reviewing our health and safety policy. We've got a wellbeing policy now that we've introduced, which covers more of the mental health side of things. But it really demonstrates your commitment going forward to keeping your employees safe, which in the same vein will keep you compliant with the law. So it's a bit of a no-brainer. But yeah, so as part of this webinar today, I am offering I mean, there's loads of resources out there that you can tap into, but if you want to speak to a human being, then by all means pick up the phone or send me an email if you've got a question. As part of this webinar, I am offering a free HR health check. So with a specific emphasis on being back to work. So it is about safety, it is about making sure that you're compliant before you get everybody back, if that is the route that you go down. So yeah, that's me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So I'm just going to stop recording for the time being.